Good evening. I am back in San Antonio this week for a class, so good to be away from the DC area. Had a pretty productive week and stuff. But with all that being said, we're going to go ahead and we'll get into Module 7 this evening. And so we have two topics. We got Chapter 15, which is Leadership Ethics, and Chapter 16, which is going to be Team Leadership. So these are going to be sort of two things that have been around for a little bit as the theory of leadership has emerged. For those of you guys that are using Norhouse's eighth edition, I believe this is going to be chapters 13 and 14. So you can go ahead and follow along on in those pages on that. So let me go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint here so everybody can take a look at this. Okay. So just real quickly, here are the week's assignments. Like I said, chapters 15 and 16, 13 and 14 for the eighth edition. And so this is going to be a little bit different in what we're going to be asking you to do. And so they call these virtues-based theories. So this goes as we're going to see all the way down back down to the times of Aristotle and Plato. And this was in the philosophies of the philosophy of virtues or the philosophy of the good. And so this is where ethics really comes from. So what we're wanting to be able to do is for you to understand what those are, how they apply to the 21st century workplace, and then develop what you would call a learning plan for developing the virtues and really what the moral applicability would be in your context. Okay. So, what we're looking for specifically is what virtues do you want to develop? What moral abilities are needed to be able to do this? And what is some of the daily practices as well as weekly and monthly goals to be able to go ahead and do this? So, ethics, for the most part, has only been introduced into the theory of leadership, I would say, since Enron back in the mid 90s, because everybody was starting to think, why are these moral and ethical failures happening with these larger corporations? So they were having to begin to reach back and really question leadership theory. They've been picking away at it for the better part of like about, I'd say, 15, 20 years. And it's only the last decade where we're seeing things starting to come out. So, like the sixth edition of Norhouse's book on leadership, there was nothing in there on this. And that's when I went to school, was on the sixth edition. Okay. As far as the discussion questions, you can see there are going to be four questions. And there's a term that has come out over the last decade or so. It's called the dark side of leadership. Um, there is a book by Dickerson that is out there, but this is more dealing with church leadership type of things, but it's very, very applicable. Also, something about the toxic triangle. We'll cover that this evening. What are we talking about? The critical capabilities of teams. We'll review that as well too. And then the thing of distributed or delegated leadership. And we'll talk about some of that as well too, some of the pros and some of the cons. As you guys know, post, we're wanting to be able to have the first post by the Thursday or Friday of the week, and then by the Saturday, Sunday of that same week. What you will have that is different this module versus, say, module 4, when we had given you all the assignments and the midterm exam at the same time, we're wanting you to be able to go ahead and do the basic assignment and then do the discussions this week, and then beginning next Monday, December 2nd to like the 7th, so about 6 days, to be able to go ahead and actually do the final exam. It's like the midterm exam, same type of questions, 20 questions. So uh, we're wanting you to go through chapters 8 through 16, not chapters 12 and 14 because you didn't cover those. Eighth edition, again, chapters 8 through 14, they don't have the similarities in the other two chapters excluded from chapter 9 or for edition 9. So without further ado, chapter 15, leadership ethics. And you can see just by the word picture here a lot of different things that are really connected to ethical leadership. As I was talking to you a little bit earlier, ethics has been around since really cave dwellers because how are we going to be able to do these things? How are tribal units or even families going to negotiate what is right, what is wrong? And so, even when you're taking a look at some history, even to some of the Sumerian and Egyptian kings, they have been identified as either good kings or bad kings, or good or bad empires, the Assyrian empires or the Babylonian Empire, those types of things. We even talk about what are good or bad presidents, but what really consists of a good or a bad president, king, empire, and so on. So, one of the things that I find interesting and somewhat myopic in what Norhaus does is he basically makes a pretty bold statement. He says that really it was in the 70s that started the era of ethics in a leadership context. And that's not really true. And so, one of the things that, just to show you here real quickly, is that, and I'll stop the screen share for just a moment here, but you have this guy named Adam Smith. So some of you that have actually taken some economics theory, wrote the book Wealth of Nations in 1776. Well, there's a lot of great things that are in there, but he actually wrote this book 17 years before in 1759, and it really underpins all of those things from an economic perspective. So, economics, business, leadership theory, all of these are actually entwined. So, really, we've been going on for almost 300 years when we're talking about modern ethical theory in a business or a leadership context. So this is actually, if you're really interested, it's worth a good read. A little difficult to get through because I mean it was English in the 1700s, and they wrote long sentences, like 2, 3 pages long at times. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. So getting back to the slides here. Okay. So as you can see, we have some folks that have been really sort of trying to provide a foundation for ethical leadership, all the way back to 96 with the Kellogg Foundation. Another individual, I believe his name was Ciola, Ethics, the Heart of Leadership, 2001, Aronson, and then 2006, Brown and Trevino. These are works that are actually mentioned in the text. So take a look at those as well too. So, what really is ethics? How do we define it? And really, this was the struggle that Plato and Aristotle had really begun to wrestle with, and they started with the Greek word ethos, which basically meant what are the customs, the conduct, the character that we are actually looking for in people? What are the virtues? What are the values that we are expecting of individuals or society at large? What's appropriate? What are the rules to be able to decide what is good or bad or right or wrong? These are things that have been going on for a lot of years. Some of the very first ethical codes were obviously, we know the Ten Commandments. Ten Commandments were written between 1446 to 1406 BC. You had the Code of Hammurabi that was about 150 to 200 years preceding that. Now more like about 400. You had some of the Sumerian codes that were even predated 200 to 400 years before that. But really, what they were all trying to do is what is the foundation in the decision making process of what's good or bad for a people, a culture, a society. And so, what Kohlberg had done in his work, Stages of Moral Development, he tried to codify how do we actually develop the morality of the human being. So he's like looking at all this history, all this background, all these ethical types of things, And he's talking about stages of moral development or six stages of moral reasoning. What's interesting about this is, and you can see there's like the level one, level two, you can see the six stages here. One of the things that is not in here is Kohlberg is actually talking about at different ages, there are stages of moral and ethical development. So it's not a thing that you, as an adult, arrive at. Kohlberg is actually looking at there through people's lives. There gets to be a point in time where they don't really understand right and wrong, but there actually is a time where they begin to understand right and wrong and what concepts and principles are. And there are a lot of cultural things of when they determine what is right and wrong. So in the Jewish culture, there's the bar mitzvahs, where right around age 13, that's when they're looking at a young boy becomes a man. Well, it's not because they're a man, it's because they're at a point of reasoning to understand what is right and what is wrong. So different cultures over the millennia have really embraced this type of thought process. Holberg, all he did is he just put some fences around this so we could be able to grapple a little bit with this. I could probably spend an hour going into each of these things here. And then there's like half a dozen other folks from an educational perspective that we could go ahead and talk into this. So those of you that have taken an education track before and you're looking at the different stages of development from a learning or educational perspective, Holberg could be included into this as well. But this is, from an ethical leadership perspective, and not necessarily educational. Okay. So there are three basic ethical theories that they're talking about here. And I'm going to, again, sort of take issue with one of these for just, in a moment. But the theories are really, what are some approaches that we as a culture, as a society, as an organization, to making moral decisions regarding conduct. So historical is ethical egoism is I'm going to act in my own personal interest. What's the greatest good for me? Utilitarianism is how can we create the greatest good for actually the greatest number of people? And then you got altruism, which is how is it that we're actually able to promote the best interest of others? Um, One of the other theories is called deontological ethics. And what that really does is it sort of goes a little bit between utilitarianism and altruism, and that it looks like what is the duty? What is my responsibility? Yes, ultimately we would like to be able to do the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, but you know, we can throw Hitler in there. He was trying to do the greatest good for the people of Germany. And arguably, until things came off the rails, he was actually doing that and stuff. But was that ethical leadership? Well, the fact of the matter is, no, it was not, because he was not pursuing a duty to all of mankind. He was just focusing on a certain group of people. So, even from an altruistic perspective, promoting the best interests of others, well, which others? Is it a narrow scope of just the stockholders, or is it those that are stakeholders? Is it just the community? I mean, these are the ethical things to be able to look at is when corporations begin doing business. So central to ethics and leadership is a process where leaders influence others to reach a common goal. Okay, that's just as you guys learned in Unit 1, that's the fundamental thing of leadership here. Amongst all the hundreds of different definitions, that's the most common and simplistic one. But here's the thing. So you can see I've sort of italicized and made a different color, influence, because that's what we're going to be looking at. Ethics is how we go about influencing people. Okay. So it focuses on the influence dimension. So leaders basically, to be able to influence, you have to have some type of impact. Okay. And what that really means is, from a leadership perspective, ethically, that leaders are burdened with how we actually influence in order to impact. So you can influence a lot of people to do a lot of things. And we know from the Godfather and the mafia stories and all of this, I need you to go do this because if you don't, I'm going to take your family out or something like that. Okay. That's obviously influencing somebody, but not in an ethical way. And so this is where these three different theories of leaderships or categories of ethical theories come into play. Okay. So this is where organizational values come into play. Are the values ethical? All right. So one of the things that has been interesting in leadership development in the values, one of the things that in a New York Times op-ed article that was sometime in 1970, a gentleman named Friedman declared publicly that there is only one ethic in business, and that's to maximize shareholder wealth. Okay, so if you think about this, if the purpose of an organization that is publicly traded is its only purpose is to maximize shareholder wealth, is that really ethical? Okay. Some people may say yes, because hey, the people that own this, they're the ones that are responsible for it. And they should be able to go ahead, and it's their company and they've invested in it. They should be able to do that. Does that make it right? Um, so we've seen a lot of companies that embrace this, and then in doing that, they disregard the values and the things that their company does to be able to impact. So, Bhopal, India, where I believe it was, we don't remember the company's name at the moment, but they were in India and they were dumping toxic waste because A, there was no regulation, B, it was cheaper to be able to do that, C, they were doing it out of the view of the American agencies like EPA and those. Uh, so really no harm, no foul, and it maximized shareholder wealth. Okay, but what about the people that were down the river when they put all these pollutants in India? So these are the things that you really have to look at. What are the organizational values? So we're going to look at a couple of different leadership values, and you've heard of a couple of these people: Heifetz in his adaptive leadership, and Burns in his transformational leadership, and what each of their perspectives on ethical leadership are. So we know Heifetz, he basically is, hey, when an organization is in conflict because of internal or external pressures, it creates some conflicting values of what it is that we should be able to do, because now the work environment and the culture is changing rapidly, and we need to be able to mobilize people in the workplace to be able to face the issue head on. So really what it is Heifetz talks about is the leader provides what he calls a holding environment. And it's in this holding environment where everything is taken into context. Where are we at? What do we need to do? We're here. How do we get to where we need to be? What are the steps? Who needs to be doing what? Those types of things. And to be able to develop, to encourage, to be able to take and influence people in a way where they trust the leader, where the leader nurtures them and provides empathy so the followers can feel safe to be able to confront the hard problems. It's basically, look at, you guys know what we're here for. Yes, it's tough. And basically, you can do this. Here's some of the tools. Let's walk you through what this is. here are going to be some of the challenges here where we may take some setbacks. So really, again, it sort of boils down to what the goals of the organization are. And Heifetz, in adapting to the difficult situation, is equipping and providing value. He is ethically walking them through them. He's being transparent of what is going to be coming basically down the road and challenging them to get from point A to point Z, so to speak. So Bass, we knew him from transformational leadership theory. And Bass is looking at, as a leader, we need to really focus on follower needs, values, and morals. Okay, so he's the first one that really sort of calls it out about morality and ethics and stuff like that. You have Heifetz that sort of did this in a passing thing, but Burns is putting it, front and center. So basically, it's like I need to, as an ethical leader, move my followers to higher standards of moral responsibility. This stuff in Bhopal, India, that is not an ethical thing to do. Even though we can get away with it and stuff, it's not ethical for us to be able to do. We need to go to higher standards than just making money. Okay. And Burns also basically said leadership actually is connected to moral aspects of things. There's a moral dimension to it. So he and Heifetz actually do agree that as an ethical leader, we need to engage with followers and help them go through the internal, value sort of thing of sometimes it's easier to just do the easy thing instead of the right thing. Okay. And so, how do we really help them work through this? Burns also goes through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Again, we could probably take an hour just going through that theory, but those of you that are familiar with this is sort of where Burns, from a business and a leadership context, has built his transformational leadership theory. So we talked a little bit about the dark side of leadership. And so here's sort of the triad of this. You have destructive leaders, susceptible followers, and conducive environments. Okay, so Hitler, destructive leader. Okay, he drew on his charisma, his personal power. He is an extremely narcissistic individual. And if you look at just his childhood, oh my gosh, what a mess. And he definitely did peddle an ideology of hate towards the Jews and those that supported them, and just anybody that was not within a particular approved context from a genealogical or biological perspective. So you had followers that were susceptible. This was on the heels of World War One. Economically, Germany was just on its back, very deprived economically, and just from a national pride, there was nothing there at all. So here's this guy who says, "Hey, we can make Germany great again," and stuff. And here's some ways to be able to do that. What we're doing isn't going to get us anywhere we need to do. We need to reform. We need to step up to the plate and do some radical things. Okay. So people that are in really bad situations are very susceptible. Hey, there might be a ray of hope. I may not care for the guy too much, but hey, the fact of the matter is look at he's actually, you know, he's got a plan here. Okay. And so you have people that are going to be conformers that like, okay, yeah, I'll go along with this. And others are going to like, you know what? I'm going to be in the inside track of the leadership of this because I'm going to be a good follower. I'm going to be drinking all the Kool-Aid and stuff. So conducive environments. Okay. So we have followers that are just morally, economically deprived. And also you have a nation that's just not in a good place. And just all of those equations. So we can go to Enron, we can go to a lot of these corporations that historically have had just huge ethical fallout and stuff. And you can look at this, triad of leaders who are destructive just in their very nature. Followers are just looking for a glimmer of hope and then a perfect environment to be able to put these, two together. Principles of ethical leadership. Okay. So Norhouse, as you will see, will go through several pages, use several different authors, and puts together these five principles of ethical leadership. So ethical leadership, looking at the body of scholarship from the Leadership Academy, number one, respect for others, respect for the follower, respect for suppliers, respect for the people that are indirect recipients, stakeholders. Um, Really, they show an absolute order of respect for anybody that their organization, their business, their corporation may have some type of contact with. Ethical leadership also serves others. And this is where we're really looking at perhaps transformational leadership. We're looking at servant leadership by Greenleaf. A lot of the ones, the four different leadership theories we talked about last week, really are going to build into this. And a couple of you actually took some leadership theories, you merged them together because you saw a little bit of yourself in each of those things. And in your work context, you saw, this is from a leadership perspective. If I was leading this organization, these are the things that I would borrow from. Okay. Um, Justice. We have a lot of injustice that's going on in the world. So ethical leaders are like, okay, we need to respect others, we need to serve others, but we need to show justice. This is critical. Justice is really, how do we honor those that are in the right, and how do we minimize or address those that are in the wrong? That's justice. Okay. And then there's this thing of integrity, of honesty, being very, not all of this dark poker room type of stuff where you're just, trying to manipulate people because of ignorance or whatever. It's just doing the right thing for the right reasons, regardless of who's looking. Okay. The other thing is building community. And this is one of the things that Adam Smith in Wealth of Nations that he really looked at was, what is the role of my giftedness? Whether I'm a butcher, whether I'm an iron worker, whether I'm a farmer, whether, any of those things. What is it that the community basically needs? And so, how do I gather people around me to be able to meet that need within the community? Okay. So, this is the conundrum. So when we're going with Friedman's article in 1970, it basically says the only ethic that is out there is to maximize wealth for shareholders. Ethical leadership says, well, we need to build into the community. So when I'm looking for respecting others, serving others, showing justice to all, manifesting honesty to all, and building into the community, that's a far different ethical perspective than what Friedman had actually said. Unfortunately, there's another couple of scholars, Jensen and Meckling, in 1976, that sort of took Friedman's article and went even deeper into this and basically said, okay, yes, it's not just the stockholders and stuff, but it's also the duty of every employee to be able to do whatever they can to be able to do this. So they actually really took the idea of Friedman and then pretty much put some a model to it. And what was really sad, it was the Ivy League business schools that took Friedman, Meckling, Jensen, and others teaching of this sole ethic of maximizing shareholder wealth to their MBA programs. And what is just horrible is within a decade of beginning to teach these things into their MBA programs, these are when major ethical things started happening in just just huge numbers and stuff. So this is why the principle of ethical leadership really began to emerge. It's like we're teaching the wrong things. You may have heard me say this the first week in the introduction that in 1960 at Harvard Medical School did a survey of the students that were coming in. And they asked them the basic question, why is it that you want to be a doctor? I believe it was 95% basically said, because I want to help people. Some 40 years later, either they, the medical school, asked the same question, or it was another research team. I don't remember. They asked the same question, and the answer 75% said it's a great way to be able to make money. And so when corporations start focusing on making money, they lose their very purpose of what the world community is needing them to be able to do. So we're seeing that education, we're seeing the medical community, we're basically seeing the automotive community. I am seeing personally in the defense industry how money has now trumped actually building quality weapons for the United States Air Force and the Western allies. It's a real problem. That's why ethical leadership is so important. So these are the five tenets that really are critical. Okay. So what are the strengths of ethical leadership? Well, I think we've pretty much been talking about those, but you can see the five things here. There has been a large amount of research recently on ethical leadership, and it talks about the things of ought, what needs to be considered, what ought to be done, what ought this ought to be to look like. And really what we're trying to do is, you can do all these things, but does it really work? And so scholarship is actually stating that ethical leadership does have benefits and it actually does predict the climate of an organization. But we're going to see in some of the downside is, do we really have the data to be able to prove that? Okay. But what it does say is in the climate of the organization that in ethical organizations where a leader is operating ethically, okay, and doing the five things that we talked about, that ethical norms, attitudes, behaviors are exhibited by followers because of the ethical leader. So they're concluding that ethical leadership is linked to well-being and, more importantly, as well, the purpose of the organization to be able to meet the performance objectives of the organization and also of the followers. Criticism, they say it still is in the early stages. And I would have to agree. We've only been really looking at this in about 20 years. Um, but then also what really is ethical leadership. And part of it is like we said, we started with Plato and Aristotle. Well, that's a Western worldview and a lot of those things. So you can, go with that, with the Judeo-Christian ethic and all of those types of things and say, well, have we really looked at this? I would venture to say that we have, and that's because of another guy that had done a lot of research. His name was Max Weber. He was a German sociologist in the early 1900s, and he looked at the Judeo-Christian ethic. He actually looked at the Buddhist ethics. He looked at even the Jewish ethic and stuff, and several others. And he comes back after doing all of this research in different books. I have like each of those books in my library over here. And he comes back to what he basically is calling the Christian ethic and stuff. And he basically said, because in a Christian worldview, that they're working for not just what's here in this world, but in afterlife, and they have a responsibility to God to be able to what it is that they're doing here to be able to please Him. This is why they're saying that there is a greater level of ethical behavior in this. So it's actually the term is it the Protestant work ethic and so. But again, we could spend hours on that as well too. Okay. Application. Well, one of the things I found fascinating about Schreiner is it actually has an MBA in ethical leadership. Go ahead and just do a quick scan. You're not going to see this much. I think there's only one or two other programs, so it's great on Schreiner that they're actually doing this. Okay. It can be applied at all levels of organization, and it is believed to reduce follow tendencies to really not ethically, do the right things that we're needing them to be able to do. So, the big thing is the leader-follower relationship is central to ethical leadership. This is why we're going all the way back here. Respect others, serve others, show justice to all, manifest honesty to all, and build it in the community. It has others just all the way through it here in its very DNA. So, team leadership. So we have ethical leadership. What do we do with it? So we got followers, but what do we do with the team? And this sort of really, these two chapters get into the heart of what the title of the course is about. Okay. Um, because this is, uh, business ethics and teams and stuff. That's what we're really trying to be able to do. So let's sort of define this a little bit. So, team leadership, okay, it's a type of an organizational group composed of members that are interdependent, share common goals, and have to coordinate with each other to be able to accomplish the goals. And they work collectively to achieve those goals, and they develop strategy to be able to help with a competitive advantage, to be able to place that organization, that group in a position to really feed into the community. So, they go ahead and they talk about sort of what are some of the team leadership factors that are influencing effective virtual teams. And this isn't just necessarily from virtual, but we have so many because of COVID that are still doing this. And I believe this was when the book was written that Norhaus was trying to really capture this. But the changes in technology, the distance, and the team structure. So these are factors that can actually influence leadership. Okay. Now, there is a theory that is out there on about shared or distributed leadership. So this is where servant leadership, this is where even transformational leadership, this is even more, probably more so like Heifetz and adaptive leadership where they're really equipping followers to be able to accomplish the particular task. So really it isn't a leader taking a megaphone and saying, barking out orders. Okay. It's coming alongside developing people to the point where they can increasingly take responsibility and the leader basically is just going to monitor and then encourage as needed. So, shared leadership, just look at the definition here. Members of the team taking, on leadership behaviors. Okay. Shared leadership could be that there really is no leader and everybody works autonomously, it's self-directed. That's a utopian type of thing. There's got to be somebody, even if you got in a military construct, you got a bunch of four-star generals, somebody actually has to take the point to be able to sort of herd the cats and get everybody going in a particular direction. Has nothing to do with the capability of the followers, but somebody needs to provide the direction. Okay. So personally, this is where I see a flaw in shared leadership. Now, if I stop barking off orders in my megaphone, well, and I got to develop people, that means I got to trust people, which means I need to allow them to be able to make mistakes. And that takes a lot of courage from a leadership perspective that has been used to the formal leadership structure to take responsibilities for when their teams fail. Okay. But the hope is you're being able to do that. You're developing people. You're even developing your replacement. Okay. But they're not as dependent upon you. In theory, if you're doing that, it should provide less conflict, more consensus, and a lot of trust on the team. Distributed leadership. Again, very similar to shared leadership, but you're distributing it to particular people, involves sharing of the influence of team members. So, somebody may be really good at a particular type of thing. So, okay, you take the point on this. Okay, Sarah, you're a lot, better on the analytical stuff over here with the spreadsheet. So you got a couple of people who are pretty gifted on that. I just need you to be able to take them. So that's distributing tasks or functions within the leadership as well. So the ideas are very similar in that the leader is literally taking off some of their responsibility and developing people to do these things for the team. So, team leadership model, you have a lot of different dynamics to this. So, you got leadership decisions, but in those leadership decisions, there are some things that have to be done internally. Who are we going to have doing X? How are we going to get supplies? What are the outcomes? External leadership actions. How am I going to deal with my suppliers? How am I going to deal with the community and some of those types of things? So those are what we'd call really the external stakeholders as well. But in doing this, you can see that with the internal leadership actions, you have the task, as I was telling you about, and the relational of building and developing people. The external things is, okay, how am I going to network with my suppliers? Or how am I going to determine what are in-house or outsourced functions? And how am I going to be able to do those types of things? But everything leadership when making decisions, when they are doing actions to address the internal process or the external process through task or considering task relationships and environments, when they are collaborating and they are handing over the leadership in each of these areas that are here, the leader is looking at the team's effectiveness. How are they performing? How are they being developed? Are they on task? Are they achieving the outcomes of the organization? These are the things that we're looking at in this team leadership model. This is Hill's team leadership model. And so this is one of the more comprehensive ones. It's relatively simple, but as you can see, there's a lot of moving pieces. So there is some complexity to it. There's a few other team leadership models that are out here. Okay. So you have Hackman in 2012, you have Larson and LaFosto in 89. They're very similar in how they're looking at things. They're looking at group effectiveness and team excellence. So these are the characteristics of these. So when you're looking at each of these things here, Hackman is talking about compelling purpose, right? People, real team, so on and so on. But compelling purpose, when we're looking at Larson and LaFosto, you can see a lot of this is very, very similar. So the good thing about that is even though these are, let's do the math here real quick, 10, 20, about 23 years apart, the same ideas are prevalent. And that's a good thing because that is showing a consistency in scholarship, which means this is probably some stuff that you can take to the bank from an applicable perspective. So, from a team leadership decision, I'm a leader and I'm deciding, okay, I want to delegate some authorities and responsibility to my team members. I have three basic decisions. Should I monitor the team or take action? So let's say that I've gone ahead, I've done this, and everybody knows their assignments, I've developed them. Now we're going through. So in many ways, this may be like Heifetz viewing from the balcony. What is going on? Okay. Um, Sometimes when they're hitting some conflict and things are being challenged, the dynamic of the group gets a little interesting. So, should I immediately jump in or do I allow them to sort of work it out? You know, and that depends. It just depends on the situation. It depends on the people. It depends on how significant this is. Sometimes, if you jump in too early, they haven't really learned to take responsibility and work through problems. Other times, if it's, a really an important thing and you wait too long, that could not be good for the organization. So, should I let things be or should I take action? Second thing, should I intervene to meet the task? So, okay, guys, look it, you're screwing up here. Here's the task, remember. Or are I needing to address the relational needs? Are they needing more encouragement? Are they needing to say, like, am I needing to say, hey, you need to work together. You got people's backs here. And so you're all in the same team. You're just coming at it a little differently, and each of you are gifted in a different way. I cannot tell you how many times I have to do that and stuff. I've probably done that two, three, four times in the last 6 months in some of the teams that I'm working. Decision three, should they intervene internally or externally? So, should I use external pressures to be able to do things, or do I need to have other experts to come in to help out? Or do I need to really take somebody off to the side and develop them? So, and again, these are some of my takes on this. The book has a little more of a lockstep approach in this, but I'm just trying to get what are we really trying to do when they talk about a theory here? So, when we're looking at, these things, should I take action or not? What you're seeing is this is okay, internal, external. This is McGrath here, and monitor or should I take action? So they're looking at four things: diagnosing the group of deficiencies. So if it's internal and I'm just monitoring, that's action one. Okay. If it is basically probably external, or I'm sorry, if it is an executive action type of thing where I need to actually do things and stuff, okay, I can take remedial action. Or if they're getting ready to go over the cliff and there's some things where it can have some external impact to the organization of the group, then yes, you're going to have to really intervene. So, a couple of names you're going to need to know: McGrath. And so these are going to be the four team leadership actions. And then Hill in the team leadership model. So those are the two key things that Norhaus is really sort of, pounding the desk on that we need to know. Okay. Well, how does this work? Well, the thing about it is, especially with Hill, it provides a cognitive map to sort of identify the needs. Is it internal, external? Do I need to deal with the task of the relationship? Would be what McGrath would talk about as well too. But the thing about it is this: it provides a mediation process for the leader. Do I monitor or do I take action? And so it really weighs the pros and cons of that. And again, it's just going to be situational type of thing. But the big thing and the good thing about it, it helps a leader to determine what the required intervention might need to be. So some of the strengths, it talks about real life organizational leadership issues, and it does focus on assessing team performance as far as are they effective? Are they achieving, going the right direction? Are they um, making progress to the organizational outcomes? Also, it provides some guidelines to help design and maintain effective teams, and it helps us to determine, well, okay, how can I really employ them and change the role of the leader and stuff on these types of things? And how do I really develop followers to be able to share leadership? Okay. Criticism, well, Hill's model is a conceptual framework. It only listed some of the skills that leaders might need. And even though, like I said, it is simplistic in like the five, six different things, but it's got a lot of subtype of things, which makes it very complex. So it's really difficult to know what to use, when to use it, how to use it, as we even talked about. That's why I'm sort of using more practical language than what Norhaus does. And it's because of the criticism so far. I'm just suggesting here are some ways to be able to do this. So application, guide the team, diagnose the team, provide corrective action. That's what the model is good for. Okay. Um, let's see here. Okay, so the writing challenges, these are some of the things, but one of the things just to let you guys know I'm seeing really great improvement on is the personalization and not going just directly for the by the book answer. So I'm getting, personal input, observations, and application. That's what this is all about. I want to see that. I don't want you to regurgitate what it is that the book is saying and you're just re-wordsmithing it. And so that's what I want to see for the final assignment is a lot of that. Also, I'm seeing more people citing better, using better sources. That's great too, and stuff. So, um, I'd been impressed with the quality of papers over the last couple of weeks, and so just keep continuing improving. And if you have any questions on the notes that I've been giving you, like what the heck does this guy mean? Give me a call, email me something. Okay. So with that being said, um, we will go ahead and call it a night. But again, if you have any questions on the assignments or something on the reading material or just how I'm grading or anything else, please let me know. And stuff, that's what I'm here for. Actually, I'm sort of sad that this is the last module because even though we're not meeting face to face, I feel like I'm getting to know each of you and some of your weaknesses and strengths, and I see everybody's improving, which that is always just so very, very much encouraging. But again, I'm going to put an offer out there that even after the class, if you guys have questions on anything, I'm here to help. Okay, I'm not here just for this class. All right, ethical leadership and just even what you're doing in this program is really critical. So, with that, we'll sign off for the night and good luck on your final writing assignments and on the final exam. Okay. Well, we'll be talking with you guys later. And thanks for just all the hard work that everybody's been putting in. Good night.